Hello and welcome back to Traffic Talks. I'm very excited to be recording this podcast. It's currently Thursday, actually, which is basically a week into lockdown, and it's been quite the journey, but it's actually been, for me at least, quite nice. That aside, just a quick update. It's been so good. As bad as that sounds, it's been nice being on lockdown because as a partial introvert, not having to go out and engage with people has been fun. However, the lack of being able to go out and do whatever I want has been frustrating, but the people who cause that frustration aren't here. That's been good. I haven't gone stir crazy because, like I said last week, I am working, so my 8 till 5 is occupied. And I'm not really stressed out about other things because my brother and sister, they've really cracked down and helped around the house. So we are all doing good and not getting on each other's nerves. I actually wanted to make a joke last week already that quarantine should be renamed quarreltine for the lockdown because a lot of people fight. And especially when you're in closed quarters, it can get really hectic, but for us it hasn't, so I'm just really grateful for that. This week's topic is actually how I do my podcast, which I thought would be really interesting and really fun. So I actually wrote out my points and I'm sitting down to record it and just enjoying this process because I get to talk about something I just started, which is really, really fun. And for anyone else who wants to start the podcast, this just goes to show you don't need the best equipment, you don't need the latest stuff, you don't need to go out and spend a whole lot of money and not know how to recoup it, because this is definitely not for profit in any way, shape or form. It actually costs me time. That aside, I really enjoy it, and that's why I'm doing it. So here we go. I've broken it down up into about 5 bullet points, and I'll speak about each of them as I go along. The first one is the equipment that's needed. I literally bought nothing. I had everything on hand and I just made do with what I have. So I have a laptop, which is like the shared family computer that I just use. I have my cell phone, which I record on. I use the microphone in my headphones, connects to my cell phone, and then I record it on just the audio recording app on my cell phone, and that gets a better quality of audio than just speaking directly into the phone. And it also just minimizes the background noise. That's why I use that. Everything is literally things I already have. So my headphones, my cell phone, a laptop that I already have, and then free audio editor. There's one called Wave, and that's the one I use. Everything is free, or I already have it on hand, and that's what I use to edit. That's the equipment. That's the equipment portion. How I get my ideas is basically, this is therapy for me. So I just get to talk my nonsense about what happened and how I feel about it, or whatever happens. That's how I come up with the content that I choose to create. Like with last week's episode, a lot of my feeds in terms of YouTube and Instagram were flooded with people like how to not be bored, how to do this, things you can do while in lockdown. And I just thought, no, that's not what we should be doing. We shouldn't be wasting our time trying to do busy work. That's how I came up with the idea for last week's one. And a friend of mine mentioned they wanted to start the podcast, which is where the idea for this particular episode came from. Getting ideas, how to do it, what equipment you need, that kind of a thing. That is how I come up with ideas. It's literally everyday life where I'm just like, what is my opinion on this? Why am I struggling with this? What can someone else learn from it? And that is what I like to do. How I record my podcast is basically me sitting down like this, chilling and just recording it and just letting go in terms of not filtering. It does cause a lot of problems when I edit because there's a lot of nonsense I have to cut out or reform or things like that. But that is how I do it. I usually write down bullet points like I have in front of me and then just talk my own nonsense according to each point. Sometimes I'll write it out beforehand, not in a form of like word for word on a script, but maybe just like key points that I want to make under each bullet point, if that makes sense. For example, I made a bullet point called equipment, and then beneath that I was like, these are the items I use, getting really specific with it. Sometimes I'll just give broad things and then discuss that. Other times not. It just depends on what the topic is and how I feel about it and what I want to convey. So those are how I record the actual words that I want to get out. In terms of space, I literally just plug it in my phone. I make sure I've got enough room because audio travels, and I also like to make sure I'm calm and I'm quiet and I've got a good silence around me, because it's not fun when you're trying to talk and there's background noise or there's something irritating you, like scratching or noise or something that will just disturb you and get you out of the flow. Finding a good quiet space to record and time to record, because sometimes you need to sometimes gather your thoughts. Other times you already know what you want to say and you want to get it out, then you actually need to hold yourself back from just word vomiting everything. That is how I like to record it. When it comes to editing, I, as you know, take a long time to edit things, which is why I've decided to record 1 to 2 podcasts on the same day or one day apart and then edit those. So I'll get to that later. You can get an application called Wave directly to your desktop or laptop, whatever you use, and you can edit audio on that. They also provide like free music and stuff. So not the latest songs, obviously, but little tunes like I added at the beginning of last week's podcast. I'm still playing around with my editing, so it will change up a bit. But for the most part, there's a lot of things you can play around with, like sounds, voiceovers, bleeps, like I did 2 or 3 episodes ago. Editing generally takes me about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending how much I need to cut out and edit. So for each podcast, I spend about 2 to 3 hours editing, and those are usually just for the longer ones. Shorter ones, not so much. Last week's one, I pushed through and edited in about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and that was under 20 minutes. So you can push through, and especially because I knew what I wanted to talk about, I had things better formed in terms of knowing exactly where I wanted to go with it. Having a plan definitely makes the editing process easier on you, and you don't have that much to cut out or to fix or things like that. So what I'll do when I'll edit is I'll copy the audio file from my phone to my laptop, open it up in Wave, and then just literally edit out all the nonsense. What I usually find, especially when having to listen to myself, is that I tend to slow down on purpose, because I know I tend to get excited and speak very quickly and then mumble over my words. So it's a conscious thing to record it much slower. I also notice I separate T's and S's at the end of my words. Separate the T instead of just keeping it close to the word at the end. And I was just like, that's such a random thing to notice, but it's what I do. So you figure out a lot of things in your speech when you do that. I also use a lot of filler words, like, you know, like, and most commonly I edit those out. I think three or 4 episodes ago, I just uploaded an episode with no editing. And I tried so hard to not add filler words because I knew I wasn't going to be able to edit it. But that's what happened. There was like a lot of filler words. And so I spent a lot of time cutting those words out. Just be aware, editing is going to be a process in the beginning. But the more you do it, the faster you kind of get through it as you go. In the beginning, it took me 3 hours to edit my first podcast, and it wasn't even that long. And now I'm getting through it much quicker because, you know, practice makes perfect. You get there. The one thing I will also say is sticking to it has really helped me build that habit. Building on last week's podcast, hint, hint. Having to sit down and record a podcast, having to make sure I edit it, trying to upload it at a decent time has really focused me in terms of I really like this. I want to keep doing it. I need to make sure I take time to get this done because I truly enjoy it. And life's too short to just do stuff you don't want to do. We obviously have things we don't want to do, but we need to do. But doing something fun for yourself, you got to make time for that. Everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. other people just get more done because they put the effort in. And I really enjoy my podcast, so I'm going to put the effort in to make sure it gets done. Once I've completed the editing process and I'm happy with it, it's time to upload. The little blurb you have to write is honestly the most fun part of the whole process for me, because I'm more of a writer than someone who just freestyles and just speaks and just goes, because I like to paint pictures with my words, and my words kind of don't speak for themselves because I mumble and I go over things again and I repeat the things over and over, and it's just a real problem. So writing it down, having to edit it, it's always an easier thing for me to write things down and edit it than just winging it. That might have something to do with me and my fear of the unknown, because I don't like not knowing things. I love surprises when I know it's a surprise and someone else has planned it. But just like winging it and seeing where the world takes us is not the best thing for me personally. Writing the little blurb that you see in the description of every single podcast is always fun because it's a challenge in a different way. It's basically taking everything you've said, summarizing it, making it enticing for someone who's checking out your podcast, and then not repeating everything you already said in your podcast in the blurb in order to make it fun so that the person doesn't listen to everything they've just read. And it's like, but I already know this. You already said this in the blurb. Why am I even wasting my time listening to your podcast? So it's a fun challenge. It's a different thing every week. It kind of keeps you sharp in that way. That is something I truly enjoy. That is how I do my podcasts. This was shockingly short, but I had fun doing it. That is in a nutshell how I do my podcast. I will definitely think on how I plan on doing the batching. And batching is essentially doing things in groups. So that would mean recording a whole bunch of podcasts on one day, editing a whole bunch of podcasts on one day, prepping them for uploads on a whole nother day, and just doing things in batches instead of record, edit, upload, record, edit, upload, because sometimes it can be time consuming to break it up that far. However, it's easier to batch it, and it's a good idea to do it now, especially for myself, where I'm working from home. I have a bit more time to myself and I can actually get things done. I also don't want to do it too in advance. I'd rather spare a podcast and have one waiting in the wings to be uploaded if I know I'm not going to make it in time, as opposed to waiting on the last minute and then uploading late, because that's something I definitely want to crack down on, and it's something I want to get a handle on and have a rhythm going. Like I said with the habits last week, I've got the habit of recording, editing, and uploading. I want to get more done, especially now that I'm able to do it faster. Being able to get it done now is going to put stock in the bank for later when I have an emergency. So if I can get more podcasts recorded, edited slowly, and have them waiting in the wings, I'm all for that. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. I hope you have a brilliant week. And this episode will be up early on Monday morning. So, future me, you did good. To everyone else listening, you did brilliant. Have a good day. Have a good week. Stay safe. Love you. Bye.